I think it's helpful to make an introduction and meet the person face to face, but I think it's to build your company. I think it's to get the best practices for marketing, sales, knowing your competition, looking at the world market. You'll see competitors that are addressing the world perhaps in the same way that you want to address it, and so you learn from them. So this hybrid model works. But to answer your question directly, I don't think you have to move to the U.S. to get investment from a U.S.-based VC anymore. I think that's old news, and I think the world has changed. So I think that's really encouraging for not just Greece, but for Brazilian companies, Chilean companies. It's happening all over. It may not be as obvious here in Greece. I think it may take a few more years to develop because this is a smaller country, but VCs are looking for that gem out there. They're trying to find that hidden gem. So I will tell you this, that coming from another country and having been undiscovered is a way to get more interest from the VCs. In fact, one of my favorite ways that I encourage my entrepreneur friends is I say, don't tell them you're looking for money. Tell them you have all the money you need, okay? Just tell them you're looking for expertise. And that hopefully is true as well. But what you'll find is that investor will be more interested saying, oh, you have all the money you need. Then they're interested in your company. And so think about that. The investors are human too, and they're looking for something that's undiscovered that they want to have a chance to get into. And so I think it can work from here is what I'm trying to say.
We love your 10 times factor, Professor. Would that be applicable equally to the B2B and the B2C sectors if you are to launch a new company?
Okay, that's a good question. When I say 10 times, does it just apply to consumer products or to business products as well? And the quick answer is yes, is at the start, and please keep in mind that I'm an early stage investor, so I'm talking about the very start of the company, what we used to call pre-PowerPoint, before you've even developed a PowerPoint pitch about your product. When you're formulating that idea and getting it first figured out, you need to figure out, can it be 10 times better? Because it will degrade over time as it gets to market. But at that point, whether it's a business-to-business or a consumer product, you really need to think about that threshold of an order of magnitude improvement against the competition, if that answers your question. We have another one right here on third row.
Hello and welcome to Greece. What business metrics would the VC use for this 10 times bigger?
So, I think a lot of it, and I hope I'm not revealing any secrets of venture, or too many secrets of venture capital, but early stage, we don't necessarily use a lot of science, okay? And even though people think we do, but what I'm saying is there's an intuitive feel that when you look at a product, when you look at, for example, the Google search engine versus back in that day, Alta Vista and other competitors that were there at the time, you could see that this engine was performing with 10 times better in terms of the types of value of search that you would see. But it also works for, I backed a company that did scientific instruments as well. And they literally had an improvement. It was a laser-driven device that had 10 times better accuracy than its competition. But I think we may use actual quantitative metrics, but we also used just a general feel of, is this, when we look at this user interface, when we look at Uber and the customer's user experience, is that 10 times better? You get a sense, yes, it is. And so I know I'm not being given a clear answer to your question, I apologize, but it is kind of an intuitive feeling than a quantitative one. I will tell you, though, I don't think it's hard for anybody to judge two products and get a sense, is this one 10 times better, or whether it's just 1 or 2 times better. And I encourage you to think about that and compare some products on your own, be a venture capitalist for a moment and see if you can judge. Or better yet, if you're an entrepreneur, think about your product. Is it offering a 10 times better experience? And I just use this as a way of saying, if you think about it just as an incremental improvement, it'll be good, and it could be a great product for another company out there, but you're probably not building a huge company unless you have that 10 times experience. I know I didn't really answer your question, but I hope it was good enough for now. There's another question back there.
You previously discussed that, and we know that it's the rule that in 15 investments, maybe 7 or 8 will go bust. My question is, would you be kind enough to share some of the reasons why those companies went bust, assuming that they had the product market fit about which we discussed, and you already saw some traction beginning? Was that the traction leveled off? Was it something fundamentally that changed?
Oh, that's a whole other session on why companies fail, but I'll try to answer your question. The biggest reason is that they underestimate their competition that I've seen. So they get out on the market, they reach the successful trajectory, and then the competition figures it out, or maybe they had a comparable product all along, but now they've focused on the features against this new competitor. And that's what I see as one of the key issues for a company that ends up as failures. They really underestimated how much better they were than competition. But there are other reasons too. When I talked about the founding team, you'd be surprised, even a successful company can have dissension amongst the founders and end up having all this energy internally against each other, not necessarily fighting outright, but you can tell they're not working together as a team. And my theory, it's not scientific at all either, is that there's only so much energy a small company has. And if the entrepreneurs are arguing and fighting and disagreeing more than in a constructive way against each other, then that energy just goes inward and it doesn't allow them to conquer the market. And the companies where the founders do work together very well, they send and use all their energy to go after the market in a very strong way. And so that's another reason is the founding team and how it works together. My co-teacher back at Stanford, though, has an expression for what he believes is the top reason for companies run out of money, and he uses the acronym DROOM, D-R-O-O-M. And what that means is don't run out of money, okay? And he says you have to remember DROOM. And I think that is, and I know this is a little self-serving as a venture capitalist, but some people would say that the reason a lot of those companies fail is they ran out of money. I think that's a side effect of the team not working together or underscoping competition or some other issue about it. And but it is true that some companies may have a very good product and they just haven't figured out to get that next financing in time, and they've just missed it. Hopefully that answers your question.
Hey, you mentioned that venture capital and especially Silicon Valley is becoming all saturated and clogged up. And my question is that in the wake of that, we've seen that entrepreneurs have become very creative and crafty in the ways they channel and actually conjure up investment. And recently, there's been a huge surge in the use of crowdfunding. And my question to you is that, do you see that instead of a clash, which is something that everyone preempts, could there be a happy marriage or coexistence between venture capitalists and crowdfunders? So I'm approaching you having taken steps to already fund my idea through a crowd and then obviously leverage that with you.
I think that's a very topical question because that's my competition in a way is, and you were polite enough not to put it so bluntly, but that's my competition now, is other sources and means of funding. And that's another thing that is, and I should have mentioned, that is hitting these VCs that are not producing the same type of venture returns. And the quick answer to your question is, we actually like companies that are funded earlier by other means, because it might seem counterintuitive, but venture capitalists are looking to reduce risk as we invest. And so if crowdfunding, or what we call family and friends, can have a company develop its product, move it further along in the market, we see that as a risk reduction, and it just makes it actually more interesting for us to invest. Now, we also know that we will pay a higher price because those risks have been reduced. But that's okay. Another little secret of venture capital, I think I'm giving away too many secrets, Christos, so I apologize, is that price really doesn't matter that much. Because when you make 20 or 30 times your investment, if you came in and the company was valued at 3 million or 2 million or 4 million, that price doesn't really matter as much because you're making 10 or 20x on that. So one little secret of Silicon Valley, or for venture investors, is that we will pay up, we will pay higher if it's a less risky investment. And I think you will find as an entrepreneur, you will have more potential investors, because as you reduce your risk, more investors are interested. Because there are only a small segment of the venture community that really take the early stage risks that are out there. And I've done that for 25 years, but it's not for the faint of heart. It's a hard road to do early stage. And so if you can reduce that risk, it really is beneficial. Now, the danger with crowdfunding, though, is there's some arrangements that you make with crowdfunding that can sometimes get in the way of the legal side of what you're doing. So you just need to be careful of the promises you make, whether it's crowdfunding or to family and friends, or even a corporate strategic partner, a corporation that may help you. For example, I've seen entrepreneurs say, I'm in the US market and I will give away the South American rights to my company. And they may say it's not that big a market right now, I don't care about it as much. But then when they go to sell their company later on, that big partner wants to buy worldwide rights. And they say, well, where are the South American rights to the product? And they say, oh, we sold those 5 years ago to help fund us a bit more. And they say, well, we're not going to buy your company because we can't put a little asterisk at the bottom and say, this is a great product, but if you live in South America, you can't buy it from us. You have to buy it from somewhere else. We're a big company, we can't do that. So I would be very careful when you do make these commitments for other types of funding. Make sure you don't make any contractual agreements that could get in the way of a potential acquirer, which is something you need to think about even at the start of a company, even though it can happen 5-10 years down the road. That's another important advice I give, is make sure those agreements you have with any distributor or supplier have an end date on them. One of my biggest complaints or pet peeves, the expression, is when I work with an early stage company and they've signed an agreement and it does X, Y, and Z, and it doesn't say for the next 2 years or even the next 3 years, it says it in forever. And I said, how do we change this? And then there's just no leverage if there's no end date on agreements. So I hope you don't mind me interjecting, but that's another thing that I see that early stage entrepreneurs should do. I see one more question in the back there.
Hi. When raising a first round Indian company, what are the pros and cons of raising from one venture capitalist versus a team or multiple companies? And second question, if I may, how do you determine the best fit for your company, from the entrepreneur's standpoint?
Okay, I'm going to need some help on those two questions because I couldn't quite hear them all.
Translate in Greek. Shall I? No.
How do you pick the best fit for the VC you're talking to for you as an entrepreneur?
Okay.
How do you pick if you go to one VC or a team of VCs?
Oh, co-investment. Well, I think particularly early on, I tell my entrepreneur friends to go one investor at a time. Do not try to create a consortium. What you need to do is to do what's called a lead investor and concentrate only on that lead investor. As you approach investors, whether they're professional investors or not, they will say, oh, I love your company, but I'm waiting for someone else to come in. You know that individual is not a lead investor, okay? And you should be very polite and say, that's good, but I'm going to spend my time working with someone who could be a lead investor. So I encourage entrepreneurs to not only establish who is that lead investor, but actually in the US, we would sign a term sheet with that lead investor, and then I would start approaching some of those other co-investors that said they were interested, but they wouldn't be the one to lead an investment. And usually once you have that lead, it becomes a lot easier. And how many you should have, I think it's nice for an early stage company to have at least 2 investors, just because even though I said entrepreneurs are lucky, the ones that are successful, you don't want to depend that one investor, sometimes it'll be beyond your control, that one investor is changed the nature of their fund, the partner that you're working with, he or she ends up moving to another firm, things happen. So just to increase your chances to make your own luck, I would encourage you to have 2 investors. Whether you have more is just a question of economics. Now, in terms of the fit, that's a very important question because first you need to determine, do I really want venture capital? Even in Silicon Valley, in fact, maybe even more so, we get a number of students who say, I need to do a startup and I need to take venture capital. And I said, well, wait a minute. Before you say you're going to take venture capital, figure out what are you going to do with this business, this big idea you have. Is it going to go public? Is that your goal? Is it going to be an independent company? Or do you want to be part of another company that could even sell more and more of your product? Do you eventually want to sell it to Google or Facebook? Because depending on the path, what we call your exit strategy, that path where it doesn't mean you're done with the company, it just means you've sold your company or you've gone public, you need to evaluate that endpoint and say, okay, now that I understand my endpoint that I hope to achieve, here is the best fit investor. And there are some investors that are very good at helping a company do that path to a public offering. There are other investors that are in fact better at a strategic partnership. So if you have a scientific instrument and you say, this is the perfect instrument, and I think ultimately it should be acquired by Siemens or a company like that, then you may think about a different type of investor who is better at strategic investment. And then you also may decide, this is a great business, it produces lots of cash, it's a very exciting business, it's what we call a lifestyle business, which could be very good. You may want to have angels or family and friends where you haven't sold shares, but rather you've taken a loan that is paid back over time. So it really is important to look at the fit of those investors. And then back to the earlier question, which I hope I'm still not in trouble on, when you keep your company in Greece and develop it here, but you attract investment outside of Greece, make sure the investor that you're talking to is able to invest in a Greek company. You would be surprised at how many people just do not ask that question. And you're allowed to ask that as an entrepreneur. Are you able, if you like my company, are you able to invest in a Greek company? And it's important to ask that question up front because you'd be surprised at how many investors are frankly just looking to understand the market and not really going to invest in your company. Or they may say, I don't invest in early stage companies. But you say you knew it was an early stage company when you first started. Yes, but I wanted to take a look. Make sure that you ask those questions up front. Are you able to invest, if you're an early stage company, in a Greek early stage company, or let's say you're looking for $5 million. If you're looking for $5 million of investment, make sure that venture company has done $5 million investments, because they may say, oh no, we do nothing more than 2 or 3 million. So in terms of product fit, it really is important for the entrepreneurs to ask those questions up front. And I think the entrepreneur should not be afraid to do that. The venture capitalist, the investor, is going to ask you a lot of questions. I think you have a perfect right to ask a few questions back. So with that, I think we're done the questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Peter. Θα έχουμε 2 πάνελ στη δεύτερη ενότητα. Θα κάνουμε ένα μικρό break μέχρι τις 7 και 4 και βεβαίως οι καθηγητές θα είναι και στο δεύτερο πάνελ, αλλά και θα μείνουν ως το τέλος της εκδήλωσης, οπότε θα μπορείτε να έχετε και follow-up questions στο τέλος. 7 και 4 τα ξαναλέμε στην αίθουσα. Ευχαριστώ πολύ.